Yo, what's up, guys? So my name is Murph, and today I'm bringing you another Frost Mage video. This time we're going to be looking at a plus 12 Solia's Gambit that I recorded very late last night, right before I went to bed, because I wanted to have some footage of a dungeon that we could use for commentary so I can show you guys some tips and tricks, give you a rundown of what I'm doing during a dungeon and my thought process as to what I'm doing when I'm in a key. This is by no means a DPS demonstration. Actually, a couple people in this group, it was their first time ever doing this dungeon on a 12, so took it a little bit slower. So again, the overall damage at the end could have been a lot higher if, I was with a group that was more experienced in this dungeon going faster, but that's not the main point of this video. Again, this is going to be a rundown commentary of the gameplay so I can show you guys some cool tips and tricks and kind of go over the bosses and how we deal with them. So with that said, sit back and enjoy the video. Okay, so before we even get started in a key, one thing that you want to do before the dungeon starts, when you have about 2 to 3 seconds left on the pull timer, you want to use Prismatic Barrier. The reason we want to do this is because Prismatic Barrier has a 3-minute cooldown. So when the key starts, any 3+ minute cooldown is going to be reset. So essentially, we're able to pre-shield the entire group here, have the cooldown reset so that during the first pull, which in a lot of these dungeons is a really big pull, a lot of the time you're going to be lusting, there's a lot of enemies and damage going out. We're going to be able to get 2 uses of Prismatic Barrier out just for casting it before the dungeon even starts. All right, so before we get into the key, here are the talents that we're going to be running. This is the exact same build that I was using in our Frost Mage guide that we put out the other day. So as the key starts, the tank is going to run in Stampeding Roar, and he's going to aggro everything. We're going to wait for him to kind of gather. What we're going to do is we're going to drop Mirror Images as our first button. The reason we want to do this is because once everything is gathered and we start doing our burst damage, Mirror Images makes it so we're not going to be generating any threat towards ourselves while they're active. So I don't run any risk of pulling threat off the tank, so I can just go as hard as possible. And then from here, once everything is a little bit more grouped up, we're going to start our AoE rotation. So I throw out a Frozen Orb, I drop down a Blizzard, I press Icy Veins, and from here, I'm going to stack up my Death's Chill. Since this pull is so big, I'm going all the way up to 15 stacks. We're going to Comet Storm, Cone of Cold Reset, Blizzard, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm again. I'm going to shatter it with an Ice Nova. And from here, we're going to be using our Glacial Spike when we have 5 Icicles. We're going to be shooting off our procs, consuming excess Fire, excess Frost, keeping Frozen Orb on cooldown, Blizzard on cooldown, and we're going to be using Comet Storm, shattering it into either a Frost Nova or an Ice Nova. And as you can see, we're doing some pretty insane burst damage. Again, you want to keep all of your main damaging buttons on cooldown. And when you have downtime between Frozen Orb and Blizzard and Comet Storm, you want to be shattering Glacial Spikes on a priority target if you can. So again, as you can see, we're doing quite a lot of damage here. It looks like we pulled an extra pack here. So once your cooldowns expire, it's going to be the same AoE rotation of just keeping Blizzard down and Frozen Orb running. The more targets that Blizzard is hitting, the faster your Frozen Orb is going to be a reset. So if you guys make a note of my Frozen Orb button down here, when we're in a big pull, take this one, for example. If you watch the cooldown reduction on my Frozen Orb, if you have enough enemies in your Blizzard, you can get your Frozen Orb reset almost immediately. And so you can have multiple Frozen Orbs going out at the same time. And as a Frost Mage, that's one of the best feelings in the world. So again, right here, we're going to call down a Comet Storm. And I'm pretty sure I shatter it, yep, with an Ice Nova. So on small mobs like this, mobs that can be frozen, when you Comet Storm in AoE, if you don't have Winter's Chill applied via Cone of Cold, you can run into melee range and Frost Nova, or you can Ice Nova right after your Comet Storm is cast, and your Comet Storm is going to shatter against those targets because the roots from Ice Nova and Frost Nova are going to last at minimum for about a second, which is enough time for your Comet Storm and your Meteor to land. So in AoE, again, against mobs that you can freeze, you're going to be able to shatter your Comet Storm pretty much every time you press it. Okay, so moving forward, we have our cooldowns coming back up. So we're going to drop down Mirror Images and then wait for the tank to gather all the mobs, just like we did during the first pull. Once everything is in place, we're going to drop a Blizzard. We're going to use Icy Veins and throw out an Orb. Again, we're going to build up our Death's Chill stacks. You go up to either 12 or 15. Really, for me, it depends on how many mobs and how big the pull is. But again, we're going to just be doing our normal AoE rotation here of keeping Frozen Orb, Blizzard on cooldown. We're going to be using Comet Storm when we can shatter it, resetting our cooldowns with Cone of Cold and doing it again. Again, you want to be casting Glacial Spike into a priority mob if there is one in these big pulls. So again, my main target here is the Goliath. Obviously, you have the Fish Mancers who are going to be casting, and you have the Fish Stick mobs that they summon, as you can see on the left-hand side of my screen. One thing to keep in mind is these Fish Stick mobs, they will despawn if the mob who spawned it dies. So you know, obviously if the fish stick is right underneath the pole, you guys want to target it and kill it. However, again, keep in mind that it will despawn whenever the mob who spawned it dies. So again, right here, we don't have our cooldowns up, but we did have our Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, Cone of Cold reset. So again, you can see our damage is still looking quite nice. Again, like I was saying earlier, make note of my Frozen Orb cooldown. The more enemies that I can hit with Blizzard, the faster I'm going to be getting Frozen Orb back. So again, you want to keep your Blizzard down as much as possible, hitting as many enemies as possible every time that you cast it. Again, you know, you want to be shooting off your instant cast Frostfire bolts to help you in AoE, but it's also going to be generating you excess fire, excess frost. Excess fire, feel free to just shoot off Ice Lances when you have it. I wouldn't say prioritize this really over any other spell when you're in AoE. However, consuming excess fire is going to give you excess frost. And when you have excess frost, as you can see here right above my cast bar, whenever you use a flurry, it's going to consume excess frost to reduce the cooldown of your Comet Storm by 3 seconds. The reason that's important is Comet Storm, and in particular Meteor with our current tier set, is one of our highest sources of damage. So you want to be using as many Comet Storms as often as you can. So again, you want to make note of your excess fire and your excess frost procs to ensure that you're getting the most cooldown reduction that you can possibly get. Okay, so on these Guardian mobs, a very typical pull is pulling all 4 of these together. As a ranged DPS, this pull is pretty chill. I know for melee, this pull really sucks, but as a mage, we don't really have to worry about too much here. Just make sure you're not getting hit by the lines and the circles. But a lot of the time, you know, you'll pull these mobs into the boss room just to, you know, clear up space and just kite them in. You also want to start the RP on the boss while you're fighting these guys, because the boss does have like a little bit of an RP before he spawns. So I do believe that we chain these into the boss, and we do have our cooldowns ready. We have Icy Veins and Comet Storm and all that available. So since we have extra mobs for me to hit, I'm going to stack up my Death Chill. So you can see I'm up to 12 stacks of Death Chill already because I was able to cheese casting Frostfire Bolt while there were multiple enemies next to the boss. So again, that's something that you definitely want to make note of, is if you have Icy Veins going and there's extra adds that you can cleave onto, you can very easily stack your Death Chill up very quickly. So now, you know, on this boss fight, I have a 15% increase to my spell power. So another thing that you can do here, as you guys noticed, I blast waved this right purifier closer to the boss. The reason I did that is because since there are 3 targets here in front of me, if they all get close enough to each other, I can Cone of Cold them to reset my Comet Storm and my Frozen Orb. So what I'm hoping here is that somebody either knocks or pulls the left-hand purifier into the boss so that they're in range of my Cone of Cold so I can get resets, which I do believe I get here. Let's check it out. Yep, so somebody knocked it back into me. So you can see I Cone of Cold right there. As you can see, I have Winter's Chill applied to all 3 targets, and my Comet Storm and my Frozen Orb had their cooldowns reset. So that's an extra little way that you can cheese out damage. If there's ever a situation where there are 3 enemies and you think they are in close enough proximity to each other to get a reset on your Cone of Cold, or with your Cone of Cold on your Frozen Orb and your Comet Storm, you want to get in there and try to get that reset. It's just extra free damage that you can sneak out. So from here, you know, we're going into the intermission on the boss. As you can see, the tank usually is the one who runs up and presses the console here. There are going to be 4 orbs that spawn around the room, and each color is going to be associated with a position on this console. The position of this console is going to indicate which console around the room you need to deposit your orb at. So as you can see, I have the blue orb, and the tank up at the console is showing that my blue orb needs to be deposited in the back left corner of the room. So as you can see, as soon as I notice that, I'm going to blink over and we're going to run and deposit our orb as fast as we can. Our group was pretty quick about this, so luckily we weren't in this intermission too long. And from here, you're just going to continue doing the boss fight as per usual. So moving forward a little bit into the next part of the dungeon after the first boss goes down, there's going to be a portal that opens up that you're going to go through. This pull, every group that I've been in, they pull every single mob here. There's 2 caster mobs that cast a bolt ability, the Tide Sages that you want to try and kick and interrupt. All of these mobs can be CC'd, they can be stunned, they can be knocked up into the air. One other thing that you can do in this area, I didn't do this just because we're on a 12. If you have one of your party members run up this road up ahead, you can actually start the RP of the next boss early, which is going to just skip, you know, the time that you have to wait for the boss spawning, but it's also going to cause the middle pack that usually is standing in the back by the water, they're going to run forward closer to where you drop down into the next boss area. So it makes it easier for the tank to gather both those packs together. So you're not having to wait for the mobs to run in and group up, or having to kick, the casters that are far and waiting for them to run in. So again, if you want, you can have a player run forward and start the RP. And so running on up into the next boss area. So what we were talking about is this pack of enemies right over here on the right-hand side of my screen. So if you have someone go forward and start the RP, this pack of enemies is going to run towards the center of the room and stand right here. This pack of enemies is also going to come in a little bit. So you're going to have two packs standing right next to each other, and it makes it very easy for the tank to just chain pull and gather everything together. Since we didn't do that, as you guys will see in this pull, we kind of pull one at a time and then chain this pull in once it finally runs in after the RP is over. What you'll see me do here is ideally I would want to wait until all of the mobs are gathered before I start doing my AoE burst. However, I wanted to use my Icy Veins early here because I want to ensure that I have it available for the boss when we go into the boss in about a minute and a half. So again, here we're just doing our standard AoE rotation of Frozen Orb into a Blizzard. We're going to call down a Comet Storm, Cone of Cold reset, and then we're going to Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, Blizzard again. As you notice, we have 12 stacks of Death Shield. Again, depending on the pull size, you can go all the way up to 15 stacks of Death Shield if you want. It really depends on how you're feeling about how long the pack is going to live. In higher level keys, I do like to go up to 15 stacks because I know by the time I get to 15, the mobs are still going to be alive. Because, enemies in higher level keys have way more health. But in lower level keys, going up to 12 is suitable because you don't want to delay your burst so long that the mobs are already dying by the time that you're about to get all your damage off. Okay, and now going into Hooktail. So you're going to want to start the fight over here on this ping. The reason that we want to do this is because the boss is going to be spawning these expanding fire puddles on the floor beneath every player throughout the entire fight. And so we want to keep these as contained as we can in certain areas of the room. So what we're going to do is once the fire puddles are baited under our feet, we are going to move left and we're going to continue to bait these next fire puddles up against this wall until we run out of room on the wall. And then we're going to run back and do it in the reverse order up against the previous puddles that are on the ground. So you want to do this to keep the room as clear as possible. This makes it a lot easier for the tank to also hit the frontal to make sure he's hitting all the adds. So one thing that we can do as a Frost Mage, just a mage in general, but particularly Frost, is if you think that your tank is going to miss certain mobs with this frontal right here, you can drop a Blizzard if you want to help slow enemies. You could also, if you're close enough to the enemies later on in the fight, you can Frost Nova them if they're all close enough together to ensure that they're not moving so that the tank has the easiest time possible hitting this frontal breath. So again, we're going up against this wall. We're just trying to bait the fire as close to this wall as we possibly can so that this room is as clear as possible. One thing you'll see here is that we kind of got a little sketchy with the frontal and the fire puddles, but we made it out. And again, we're going to dodge the fire and run back up against the wall to continue baiting future puddles here. As you can see, it looks like we're getting pretty close to the water on the left-hand side of this room. So after these fire puddles, we are going to try and run them in the opposite direction up against the previous puddles that are already on the ground. I do believe one of our DPS does go down here, unfortunately, fairly soon. But again, you just want to keep these fire puddles as close to the existing ones as possible. You want this room to be as open as you can. So again, as a mage, we have a lot of mobility and a lot of instant cast spells. So moving out of the fire is not a huge deal for us. As long as you are not standing in it for extended periods of time or getting hit by the frontal from the tank, you are going to be all good on this fight. Just do as much damage as you can. And again, if you need to, try and help out with these adds. As you can see, the Druid put down an Ursul's Vortex over here. We can do the same thing again with Blizzard to help keep the mobs contained within that frontal. All right, and so with the boss going down, you're going to have to wait around for about 10-15 seconds. There's going to be an NPC that comes and opens up a portal, and you're going to go through the portal to get to the last boss. Ideally, with the trash percentage, you only want to pull one of these Starseers. Now, it's really up to your tank, left or right, which one you want to pull. I've found in a lot of my groups, people go left, and then they will chain this Starseer into this pack of 3 up ahead. With the Starseer, you want to watch out for the Drifting Star. It's basically just a frontal orb that will probably one-shot you if you get hit. They're more importantly going to summon these Pulsars, which every time they cast Pulse is going to do huge AoE damage to the group. So this is main priority number one. You need to kill the pulsars as fast as possible. So as you can see, our tank is going forward and pulling the next pack in. The most important mob and cast in this pack is the Ritualist mob. They cast an Unstable Rift, as you can see was going off right there. If that spell goes off, it is a huge AoE hit to the entire group. And you run the risk, especially if there's a pulsar on the ground, as you can see on the left-hand side of our screen right here, that will essentially one-shot somebody if both of those go off at the same time. They also just cast a Hyperlight Bolt that you'll want to kick when you have it available. But again, the most important thing here is the Unstable Rift cast. So it looks like our tank decided to chain these mobs into the next pack when the Ritualist was dead. So as you can see, there's 2 Ritualists in this pack. The Unstable Rifts, you can see them casting right here. Make that your top priority to interrupt. If you don't have a kick, you can use Supernova. You can run in and you can use Blast Wave. As you can see right there, I just used Supernova to cancel a couple of casts. I'm using Shifting Power to get my cooldowns back. Keep in mind, Shifting Power also reduces the cooldown of your interrupt. So if you interrupt a mob and then you happen to use Shifting Power, you can interrupt 2 things very, very quickly back to back. But again, you want to try and focus down these Ritualists and interrupt as many of their casts that you possibly can. Again, as you can see here, we are chain pulling, so we pull the Starseer in once the caster mobs are dying. These Accomplice mobs don't really do much aside from Whale in the tank, so you're able to very safely pull these into the next pack of mobs. Okay, and so we are finishing up the final Starseer here. Unfortunately, it spawns a Pulsar right as it's dying, but it's not a big deal. These mobs really don't have a lot of health, and if your whole group swaps over to them, they die pretty quickly. So going into the boss, we don't have any cooldowns available, but P1 of this fight is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. So she's going to summon some adds that will need to be nuked down. These adds are going to teleport out to a random location about 15 yards away from the boss, and they're going to cast a Shuriken ability that needs to be interrupted. If this ability goes off, it is very deadly. So as you can see here, this assassin teleported out and was casting Shuriken Blitz. It got kicked almost immediately. So you need to, ensure that this cast never goes off. One cool thing that you can do, especially as a druid, or if you have a druid in your group, if they put down Ursul's Vortex before these mobs teleport out, it will immediately pull them in and cancel their cast without you having to swap and interrupt them manually. So again, that mob jumped out, it got stunned. This other assassin was about to jump out and you can see it got pulled back in. Another thing you can do with this boss is if you tank her directly in this corner next to this cart and up against this wall, when the boss summons the adds are going to be forced to spawn directly underneath her. This makes it very easy to start cleaving them down immediately. Also, it makes it really easy for stuns and stops and all of that. So, this is something that hopefully your tank knows. Or if they don't, you can always drop a ping over here to let them know to tank the boss in the first phase over here in this corner. And again, from here, since the mobs are so close together, I'm going to be able to do a Cone of Cold reset, get my cooldowns back. Actually, unfortunately, it looks like the mob teleported out right there, right when I was going for the Cone of Cold. So unfortunately, I missed. But if you time it right, you can get a Cone of Cold reset there. So, and again, there's going to be another collapsing star that spawns before the boss transitions into phase 2, which is going to happen at 40% health. So again, just doing our normal Frost burst rotation. As you can see, there's a collapsing star spawning. Our hunter is running over there to deal with it. He takes 1 hit. He's going to wait for the healer to heal us up. He's going to run in, take another hit. And hopefully we're going to clear the star before the hyperlight jolts go out. So in the intermission, you want to have each player choose an orb to stand behind. There's 5 orbs around the room, so every player wants to find one that no one else is standing next to. Once the boss casts Hyperlight Jolt, as you can see, there are lines going between specific players. What you want to do is have one of your red lines going directly through the star that you were standing behind. And what's going to happen is when the Hyperlight Jolt cast goes off, if your line goes through your orb, it's going to break the orb, and you need all 5 orbs to be broken for the boss to transition into phase 2. So if someone in your group happens to miss breaking one of their orbs, you're going to have to take multiple Hyperlight Jolts to break the orbs. And what's deadly about this is when you get hit with Hyperlight Jolt, you get a debuff, everyone in the party, that increases the damage you take from future Hyperlight Jolts. So if you have to have multiple of these go off, you run the risk of wiping. So you want to ensure that everyone gets a specific orb and has their line pointing through it to break it on the first attempt. So as you can see here, Hyperlight Jolt goes through. We broke all 5 orbs. So we're going into phase 2. We don't quite have Bloodlust or our cooldowns up just yet. So, we're just going to be doing our standard rotation, building up to Glacial Spikes, shattering as much as we can, consuming our procs and our excess Frost and Fire, again, to get to Glacial Spike as fast as we possibly can. Another mechanic here that you're going to want to watch out for is these bolts that are going to shoot out when the boss explodes the stars. The reason you want to tank the boss over here is because generally the stars are not going to be very close to you if you pull the boss over to the side of the room like this, which gives you the most amount of time and leeway to dodge these spears that are going to be flying out. As you can see, I also like to do a kind of top-down view of my character so that I can see the exact path that the bolts are traveling in to make it as easy as possible for me to dodge. Obviously, these giant circles, don't stand in them. The boss is going to do the same mechanic that she did during the intermission throughout phase 2, where she will go into the middle of the room and she will go basically immune to damage, and you need to break all 5 of the orbs to break her shields. So again, the orbs are going to be more scattered out this time, so you need to find one, run to it as fast as you can, stand next to it, and ensure that your line is pointing through it so that you're able to break the orbs and get the boss out of this immunity phase as fast as you possibly can. As you can see here, we actually missed one. So again, the boss is casting Hyperlight Jolt, and we have a stacking debuff where any future Hyperlight Jolts are going to be doing more damage to us. So again, you want to try and make sure that you break all the orbs on the first try. If you have to go up to 2 stacks, just make sure you use some sort of defensive if you feel like you might die. And then again, from here, the tank is going to pull the boss back into this corner. As you can see, these 2 orbs are relatively close to us, so we're going to need to be aware of that. She does cast a relocation, so the stars did move a little bit further away. But on top of this, the boss is still going to be using Collapsing Star, which we're not able to see. It's just out of my camera view right here. But again, you just want to dodge these spears as they're coming in while doing as much damage as you possibly can to the boss, and having someone go out and soak the star. One thing about soaking the star is that you need to be very mindful of the knockback from when you run into the Collapsing Star. You can get knocked back into one of the spears that shoots out from the stars that are around the room. So another thing to make note of there. Unfortunately, as you can see, we weren't able to burst the boss down fast enough. So we have another phase here. No big deal. We still have about 7 minutes left on the timer. So again, you want to make sure that your line is going directly through your orb. We were able to do it first try here. Again, reducing the lethality of the debuff, but also just increasing our uptime and our damage on the boss, making the key go a little bit faster. So as we finish off the fight, you'll be able to see that at the end of the dungeon, we did about 6 million overall damage, which again, isn't the most damage that I could possibly do in here by any means, but not bad either. And we finished this key with a relatively fast pace. So pretty happy with how this key went. I'm going to be recording more dungeons and doing some more commentary over the different dungeons throughout the course of this next week. So keep an eye out for that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.